Hello, friends! Have you ever asked yourself what it would be like to speak several languages? In this video, you are going to see an interview with Chris Benke and I discussing foreign languages. Hello, Chris. Thanks for talking to me.
Good morning.
Do you consider yourself to be a polyglot?
Not really, but I just love having a go at languages. People say, oh, I speak French, which I do quite well because I live in France, and of course English, my natural language. I also speak Spanish and a bit of German, and any other language I just love having a go at. I wouldn't say I speak them, I certainly don't speak them correctly, but I like communicating in other languages and it fascinates me.
What do you consider to be some of the best things of being a polyglot?
For me, quite simply, it opens doors. Whether you consider it cultural doors or social doors or even in commerce and professional life, if you can speak the language, people open up to you. You find your holidays are more fulfilling because you can talk with local people, even though it's a little bit. The fact that you're speaking another language, literally and metaphorically, opens doors for you, and you can get much more out of life and meeting people.
Totally agree with you. What do you think is the biggest myth when it comes to learning languages?
I think people are often put off by the fact that they think before they start speaking any language, they have to sit down with a book of grammar, vocabulary, and start learning it before they do any talking, which it should, I think, be the other way around. You start talking, you start communicating, you start picking up the sounds, and then you go back to a book and say, that's what it was I was saying. Oh, there's more here. And you use the book or the teacher as an aid to continue. But I think one of the hindrances for a person starting is they think they have to go back to school, open books, and sit and learn it.
So you think it is possible to learn a language without books and teachers?
Not exactly that. Books and teachers are obviously great helps, but you don't have to say, I've got no books, I've got no teachers, I can't speak. Once you want to start to learn a language, you can, depending on the way that you learn, depend upon a teacher or a book, preferably both of them, as well as continuing speaking yourself.
But most of us are afraid of speaking. How to kill that fear of speaking?
To me, simply it is to speak with a smile. A mental smile in your head, and literally a real smile, because usually what people are frightened of when they start to speak another language that they're not sure of is to make a fool of themselves. If you say, whether it's a social or even a commercial business situation, what you're saying with a smile, your listeners will immediately warm to you and understand that you're trying to say something, and they won't laugh at you, they may laugh with you. But if you go into a restaurant, for instance, and say, I want a savage, I am angry. What? They say? I want a savage. Oh, a sandwich. Oh, yes, sandwich. Angry? Huh? You're hungry. They'll help you out because you're saying it with a smile in good.
There are so many myths about language learning out there. For example, there is this myth that you can become fluent, let's say, in 30 days. Is it possible? What do you think?
I think you can become fluent, but in a very limited domain. If you were to work behind a bar, if I were to go to Russia and work behind a bar for 30 days, I think I would be fairly fluent at, would you like a beer? What do you want to drink? Would you want ice with that? How much is that? And I'll be pretty fluent just in bar work, if I was lucky. But I wouldn't be able to hold a philosophical discussion in Russian. So you can become fluent in a limited area, which is very encouraging. But to become fluent, you really do need years and years to be in the country if you want to cover all subjects.
Do you think one has to live in the country to achieve real fluency?
It really helps. I would say yes, but then if you can't get into the country, fair enough. If you can find the people of that country in your country, if you have a group of friends, if you're learning German, a club, it can be a sailing club, a horse club, a book club, a music club, anything you want, where you can meet them and speak naturally all the time. Obviously, going to a country is so much better because not only do you have a huge variety of native speakers around you, you also have everything, the signs, the notices, the newspapers in that language, and that really is the best way. But just because you can't get to a country, don't despair. Meet the people in your country.
Could you please tell us a few words about your studying routine? Let's say, how often do you study? I mean, do you sit and learn using the books and dictionaries? And how do you do this? What is the procedure?
Well, I'm very much a phonetic learner. I'm not very good with books. I can't sit down and learn lists of things and declensions. So for me, it used to be you sit down with a CD or whatever media you have with the native speaker speaking and repeating. And I used to do this. I say I used to because we come on to another subject there, is why do you ever stop? Every day for an hour, and I would do this every day, set aside a time.
So you actually never stop learning. And then why do some people get frustrated easily and stop learning?
Many reasons. It can be that you've got other pressures in life or other interests in life that come around. But really the objective, the motivational force of your starting disappears for some reason. Either you can't get to the country, or you can't see the reason for doing it, or it's harder than you thought. But it really is, I think, that you need someone to bounce off. That is, it can be your partner, your husband, your wife, your child, your mother, father, to take you every day and say, have you done this? Let me listen to that. Let me try this. And so to keep the rhythm and the motivation going. So that any number of reasons why you'd stop. But that seems to me that the motivation disappears, evaporates for some reason.
It does. So are there any other means to stay motivated, other ways to keep going?
I think it's a little bit what I just said, in that you have another person to spur you on.
Okay.
Like my wife would say, have you done your Russian today? Have you done that today? Have you gone off and done that? Someone to prompt you.
She's very supportive.
Yes, someone to support you. It can be a friend who just says, have you done the Russian today, or have you learned? To give you some sort of goal to go for. But I think you have to find this motivation, and that comes from within, not outside. It may be an exam result is an incentive, but the motivation from within has to be something that you want to do, whether that is you really want that job in Italy, so you really want to learn Italian in 6 months, or you have a new girlfriend or boyfriend and you really want to impress them and get on with them, something that pushes you to do it, and then it becomes a pleasure.
Okay. And speaking about exams, there are so many exams out there. Do you think taking an exam might help staying motivated?
I think it's a personal thing. Again, I think for me, if I would have to take an exam for a reason, if I was a young man getting an exam to go into a university, that would be an incentive, not a motivation. The motivation really would be something that I love to do this and I want to do it, whereas the incentive would say, I suppose I better learn it because I got my test coming up next week and let's go through the vocabulary again. Whereas the motivation would say, I want to do this. I want to get better, more than better.
Do you think learning languages is different now than it used to be, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I don't know if I can answer that because, if you're in a school, maybe the language teaching is different. But I would say learning a language is very much a rudimentary thing for all humans. Children learn it all the time. So the way in which we learn languages probably has stayed the same. The way in which they've been delivered You got the advantages, of course, of more media, availability of foreign films very easily, and things like that. That helps.
What is the most amazing intercultural experience you've had because of speaking several languages?
I don't know how amazing they are, but there's, as I said, many little doors that open. One that springs to mind was something particularly English. We were going through East Germany just after the wall had fallen, from Frankfurt on our way to Berlin. It was East Germany was still East Germany, but it was now open. And I was driving along looking at the map, and I suddenly saw just off the road was a little village called Colditz. Now that means nothing probably to many people around the world, but it's something very significant to people of my age and older, because it was a prisoner of war camp in the Second World War, and a very famous one, of which books were made and films were made. It was high security, inescapable, very many famous officers were there, and it was very well known. That's Colditz. So we went to the town, and there's a huge, great castle, which was a hospital and has now become a hospital again. And this was the very place that I've seen so much about. And we went to the door, where a large woman said, "Niet, you can't go in." And she indicated down the road to the curator, and he spoke no English. And with my small amount of German, I was able to ask, could we go in and have a look? Because this was very interesting to us. And he said, yes, okay. And he took us around his museum, which is famous for pottery and porcelain, which I didn't know. And then a little room off to the side where all the things the prisoners had made, sewing machine made out of wood, German uniforms made out of pieces of lino, and all sorts of And then he said, I suppose you want to go in and have a look at the castle. Yes. Okay, I'll let you in. So he took us on a personal guided tour, just him and me and my wife, and you could see the room, which was still as it was, solitary confinement room, still with the marks on the side, the same old light bulb, frozen in time. Now it's open to the public, and I think you have to pay and all the rest of it. But because I was able to talk with this very nice young German lad, he took us around. In Spain, do you want me to go on?
Yeah, please.
We were in a small bar at the back of a tourist town, because we like to go where the locals go. It's a very small bar, me and my wife, and we saw on the walls there were these pictures of people dancing flamenco. This is down in South Spain, Andalusia. And so we started talking to the barman and said, who are these dancers? And he said, well, this is flamenco, but this is flamenco verdad, no turístico. And he said, do you want to come up to the mountains tomorrow night to see? And we said, yes, lovely, that'd be great. And next morning we went up, and in the evening we went to this little place, farmhouse, where there were all the locals, not a tourist in sight. And we were treated like royal guests coming to see real flamenco, not the stuff that you see on the tourist, but we were sort of included in the village doing their thing. And I think it was because we were able to converse in Spanish and not just shout loudly in English.
Amazing experience. If you like to travel, how can you use this opportunity to practice not just speaking your native language, but how can you go, as you said, where locals are and practice speaking? What do you need to do when you travel? Do you book special tours? How do you do that?
Well, it's just we tend to go away from where the crowds are and away from where you see English spoken here, or on parle français ici. No, we go to the back roads or small villages. Often they're away from the coastline, and we love, for instance, Spain. The cities in the center of Spain rather than the coastlines. They're not that frequented by tourists, and you find marvelous places, marvelous restaurants, marvelous museums, castles, streets, bars, just the general ambience of the land, just by going away from the tourists and looking to see where the locals are going. And that done, you go into a restaurant or a bar or a museum, and necessarily you speak their language or try to.
If you could give just one piece of language learning advice, what it would be?
I think repetition. 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 You remember that now. There's a technique. First of all, if you have and also I'd say learn phrases rather than words. Because if you just use a word, for instance, say police, for instance, a word you might need in a foreign town, and you simply go up and say police, please what? Please? There's no context to it. If you can learn the phrase, where is the police station? People understand you better. But you have this phrase, whatever it may be, repeat it 7 times, and then a minute later, repeat it 7 times. Then 5 minutes later, repeat it 7 times. Then 5 or 6 or 7 hours later, repeat it 7 times. And then the next day, repeat it 7 times. And you'll never forget it. And that phrase, not only will you have the phrase, but you'll also have all the words in it. And you can replace them and move them around. And do that, just repetition. And that's basically language learning, because that's all children do, is repeat what they want. So it starts off with food, water, mama, dada, and then it gets bigger. But it's simple repetition.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for being with us, and hope we'll see you some other time here, giving us more interesting facts about language learning.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Dankeschön and all the rest of it. And the girl said, you speak languages? So, yeah. And then there was a delayed flight came in, and there was this poor old Afghani woman, all wrapped up, and she's got delayed there, and she didn't know what was going on at all. And the receptionist put down the registration form, a little pen, fill that in. I don't know what to do. Hey, Chris, you speak languages, don't you? I said, yeah, this woman's Afghani. Oh, okay, no problem. So I started talking to her in rubbish. I said, I just pretended. I said, she looked at me and wrote something down. She wrote something down, and I made a squiggle like that. She signed at the bottom there. I said, there you are, that's the register keeper room, that's it, fine, 403. She said something back to me. I said, we were smiling at that. And they said, oh, Chris, he speaks German, Spanish, French, and Afghanistani. Wow. I didn't, I was just talking rubbish. It's to do with communication. But it's not really, that's rather a disincentive to learn a language, isn't it? You just talk rubbish to each other. But it's communication.
But you still have to be brave in order to do that.
It's the desire to communicate. I think that's the important thing. You want to communicate, and if you can do that, then the rest falls to you. And then not to worry about making a fool of yourself, because the worst that can happen is that people will just look puzzled. But no one's going to kick you in the shin or punch you because they don't understand you. There we are.
What is the most interesting, amazing intercultural experience? What is... I'm sorry. I don't remember the questions.